Hello everyone, Generation Y Conservative here, and today marks the first in a series of videos that I'm going to call as Hot Topics. And today's discussion is about abortion. Now first I want to go over a little bit of history about abortion with some quick facts, and then go into some personal stories that lead me down the path to being pro-life. First of all, there's been over 50 million abortions since the 1970s when Roe v. Wade passed. Of those 50 million abortions plus, only 1% of those abortions are attributed to horrendous acts or the mother's health. So things like rape, incest, or the health of the mother being at risk for having the baby. Now that's important to know because when you're arguing with someone about being pro-life or pro-choice, typically the arguments boil down to the fact that there's a lot of circumstances that could surround an abortion besides it being an act of convenience, that people go down the path of saying that they're doing it because of either, like I said, the health of the mother, or that it's from a rape or incest and that this child shouldn't come into the world. If you're looking at 50 plus million, but if we just narrow it down to an earlier figure just a couple years ago where it was at about 50 million, and take 1% of that, you can see the math of how many of those abortions were actually related to those types of circumstances. And it gets even thinner when you actually boil it down to what of that less than 1% is attributed to these types of actions. What's even more upsetting is the fact that then what's left is then attributed to the fact that these are all abortions or the killing of a baby out of the matter of convenience. Now let's go back a little bit on the history of Planned Parenthood, one of the leading abortion clinics. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, originally started the abortion clinic because it was her mission to rid the United States of the black population. You can see in her writings that she felt that the black population, those that are mentally incapacitated, and as well as some of the very old in some cases, were handicapping our civilization here in the United States. There's no doubt in many people's minds that this was a sick individual. While many say that she fought for women's rights, what she actually did is the exact opposite of what most liberals would consider good today. She was against the minorities in America. She was against the handicapped. She was an evil person. She was one of the most evil people in history. As a matter of fact, if you were to compare her to, say, the Nazis, it wouldn't be that far of a stretch of an imagination, because at one point she left the United States and actually went to Germany and went and further studied the eugenics with the Nazi-type soldiers. I mean, it's a matter of who taught who what led to the Holocaust. Was it Margaret Sanger and her abortion clinic mentality that led to the oven chambers and everything else that the Nazis eventually used? Or was it their mentality that led to her wanting to use that kind of thing to rid the population over here, but through a healthy means and through under the guise of women's health? I want to talk a little bit about some personal stories, and these are just things that have brought me to be pro-life, and it's not something that I expect to change other people's minds. But I think if you really take the time to think about your own life and where circumstances fall, I'm pretty sure that pro-choice people would also feel that they have stories for why they fall where they do as well. So my first experience with what led me down the path of being pro-life is when I was in college. Now, up until that point, I was pretty liberal on a lot of things, the mentality and the talking points out there of it being a woman's choice and how dare you infringe on their rights to choose, always stuck with me, and it made sense. I mean, who am I to say what a woman can and can't do with her body? And that's my thinking at the time. But it wasn't until college when I started taking an interest in a certain individual. One of the colleges I went to, I had a crush on someone, and we were hanging out a lot. We were really good friends and hitting it off really well. And at one point in time, I was driving her around, and we stopped before she got back to her apartment. And we were sitting in the car talking about things for a little while. And out of nowhere, she started telling me about this story about how in high school she got pregnant and it was a tough choice, but she went with an abortion. Now, obviously, when you fast forward a couple of years later to the point when we're in college, she's sitting here telling me this, and she starts crying, and it was just absolutely heartbreaking to see someone that I cared so much about be in so much pain. And I just let her talk. I just let her keep on talking about what was going on, what she was feeling, and she kept on saying things like, had I went through with it, how old would that son or daughter be today, and what would we be doing? What would our lives be like? How would it be all different? And she had to live with this guilt for the rest of her life of not having this kid around anymore, and the fact that she was a part of that situation. It wasn't until a couple of years later that I actually came into another story that completely blew my mind. So we were talking about the 1% of abortions that's attributed to rape and incest and the health risk of a mother, right? Well, this one actually deals with rape. And for a long time, even when I became pro-life, I was thinking to myself, these circumstances, this 1%, I have to be lenient on that at least, because those are horrific situations, and I can understand where someone's coming from with that. What I found out later on, a couple of years after college, is that my grandfather was the product of a rape. His mother was raped, and instead of getting an abortion, her family encouraged her to have the baby, and it was obviously tough for his mother to keep him. So what actually ended up happening was her sister adopted my grandfather and raised him as her son. So my grandfather grew up for most of his life thinking that his aunt was his mom and his mom was his aunt, and it was fine. He grew up in a loving household, and even his real mom, loved him and treated him like family. And it was really amazing to me, because if you think about my grandfather having my mom and her 3 brothers, and the families that came off of them down to me, and then from me to my 3 daughters, this branch of people, this family tree that has just blossomed and has been absolutely full of love, that could have been vanished because of the act of an abortion at that point in time. That one act could have wiped out, I believe I've worked up to about 22 individuals of our family right now. It made me thinking that a lot of people believe that if you have a child as a product of rape, that it's going to grow up in that household in bad circumstances. The child will be despised because of the father not being in the picture and being the person that acted on this horrible crime. But the fact of the matter is that there's adoption out there, and I sit here now off the top of my head knowing a handful, at least 5 couples in my life that are friends, that are either A, looking to adopt and have been actively searching, or are unable to have a child and are looking at their other circumstances and other types of things that they can do. And that leads me to another point that I have. The adoption system is broken, and it has to be fixed. Right now, the cost to adopt is somewhere around $30,000 to $40,000, and maybe even more, depending on where you go through. And there's a wait list, and you have to get your background check and everything, and I understand all that. But by the time you spend all the money on the kid, for a lot of people that are middle income, that's money that they could have been spending on raising the kid. I have friends that have been on wait lists now for years, and one of the couples has a child, and they've been waiting for another one, and they've been on this list and everything, and it just hasn't come around. So I think that the adoption system definitely needs to be fixed. We need to streamline it. We need to, of course, check out the family's background and make sure that these kids are going into a safe environment. But I sit here telling you this because I realize something, and that is, even if a child goes through the adoption system and the foster care system and they never get adopted, and they go through all of this, all through 18 years, and then enter the world on their own, at least they're giving them a chance to live, to make something of their life. As a constitutionalist, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that's what it's about. We're all equally born into this world. That's why all men are created equal. Not all men are equal. We are created equal. But some of us are killed off before that chance is even given to us to be equal. It's really heartbreaking. And I think that these kids that are given a chance, even if they don't have a family, are given a chance to start their own family someday and have a love in that family for it as well. Now, as I said, this is just my experience and some of the things that have led me down the path to being pro-life. But it just really makes me think about things. And I hope it makes you think as well. One of my favorite videos that I shared on Facebook a little while ago was by one of my favorite pastors that we watch online for some of the sermons, called Matt Chandler. And he is the pastor for the Village Church down in Texas. And one of his sermons on abortions really caught my eye and I thought was very powerful. And you can actually watch that video right here. But he was saying that every child in the womb has its own heartbeat, has its own lungs, has its own blood type, has its own fingerprints, has its own dreams. At 24 weeks old, a child is viable with a little bit of support from a hospital to live outside the womb on its own. And the fact of the matter is, most abortions take place after 21 weeks. So these are babies that could have lived anyway, even if it was a matter of convenience for the mother. The argument that it's a woman's choice on what she does with her body, it's not her body. The child is certainly inside that body, but that is not her body at that point. And you're taking away the choice of an innocent person because of choices that you made in most cases, if it's a matter of convenience. Go back to the story about one of the first things that happened to me when I was in college and talking with this girl that I really liked. Is she pro-life now, or is she pro-choice? Honestly, I don't know. I'm still friends with her, but I don't know. And frankly, I don't need to know, because it changed my path through life on how I felt on things. But the fact of the matter is, I believe that most people that are pro-choice are pro-choice because either they have had an abortion themselves or they know someone that has had an abortion. And they feel that they need to justify this somehow. And they keep on perpetuating this, saying it's a woman's choice and trying to make up all these excuses. But I have to tell you, some of the most staunch pro-life people in my life that are the best advocates have had abortions themselves. And I think if your heart is really changed by this experience that either you went through or seeing the regret that someone else has gone through, and you let that change your heart, you could be one of the best advocates. And I can tell you right now, the pro-life movement wouldn't hate you because you had an abortion. You know, if you realize that it was a mistake, we're gonna welcome you with open arms and say, we understand. We want you with us. Lock hands with us. Lock arms with us. March with us on this issue. Even Roe v. Wade back in the 70s, the one that advocated in the Supreme Court for the woman's right to choose, is now a staunch pro-life advocate. So what happened? I'm glad you joined me for this hot topic today. I hope to talk about more hot topics in the future. Until then, check out my last video over here, or you can subscribe to my channel over here as well. Until next time, I'm the Generation Y Conservative. Thanks for watching.